The Bible is a collection of books, like a library. It has stories, poems, history, and teachings. Deuteronomy is one of these books. It is the fifth book in the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. Deuteronomy means second law. It is like a recap of what God had already told his people. Imagine a teacher reviewing important lessons before a big test. That's what Deuteronomy is like. Deuteronomy is a bridge between the past and the future. It reminds the Israelites of their history and prepares them for a new chapter in the Promised Land. Deuteronomy takes place near the end of a long journey. For 40 years, the Israelites wandered in the desert. They were freed from slavery in Egypt, led by Moses, a man chosen by God. Moses wrote Deuteronomy. He wanted to remind the people of God's laws and encourage them before they entered the Promised Land. It was a time for remembering and a time for looking ahead. Deuteronomy is full of laws. These laws are not meant to be burdens, but guides for a good life. They teach how to love God and treat each other with kindness. God made a covenant, a sacred promise with his people. He promised to bless them if they followed his laws. This promise wasn't just for the Israelites, but for all who choose to follow God. Deuteronomy is like a family album full of stories. Moses reminds the people of how God saved them from Egypt. He talks about the 10 Commandments given on Mount Sinai. These stories teach important lessons. They remind us of God's power, love, and faithfulness. They encourage us to trust in God no matter what challenges we face. Section 5, Moses' last words, a call to obedience. Moses knew he wouldn't enter the Promised Land. Deuteronomy records his final speeches to the Israelites. He urges them to obey God's laws and to love him with all their hearts. These speeches are filled with emotion. Moses is like a loving parent, giving final instructions to his children. He wants them to succeed and live in God's blessing. Section 6, Lessons for Today, Living Deuteronomy. Even though Deuteronomy was written thousands of years ago, its message is timeless. It teaches us about God's character, his love, justice, and faithfulness. It shows us how to live a life that honors him. The laws in Deuteronomy may seem ancient, but they contain principles for living a moral and ethical life. They teach us to value honesty, integrity, and compassion. Section 7, Deuteronomy's place in God's story. Deuteronomy is a bridge in the Bible. It connects the story of God's rescue of his people with their entry into the Promised Land. It sets the stage for the rest of the Old Testament. Deuteronomy reminds us that God keeps his promises. It points forward to a time when God would send a Savior, Jesus, to fulfill his covenant and offer salvation to all. Section 8. A foundation for faith, a guide for life. Deuteronomy is more than just an ancient book. It is a living word relevant for us today. It offers guidance for our relationships, our work, and our walk with God. As you read Deuteronomy, ask God to speak to you through its pages. Let its message encourage you, challenge you, and draw you closer to him. Section 9, Continuing the Journey, Exploring the Bible Further. Deuteronomy is just one chapter in God's grand story. I encourage you to keep reading the Bible and discover the richness and depth of God's love for you. There are resources available to help you understand the Bible better. Don't hesitate to ask questions and seek guidance from pastors, teachers, and other believers.